The Springboks look to make history this week and end New Zealand's 31-year Eden Park streak as the Red Roses, Ireland and Scotland qualify for the World Cup quarter-finals in England. Welcome back to the Ruck and Roll Show. We welcome Luke back to the show after 2 weeks where I had to go into hiding after the Springboks lost in Ellis Park to the Wallabies. Luke, how are we feeling?
Much better after the win 2 weeks ago. Oh, almost 2 weeks ago now. I'm recovered, feel fine. Actually, full credit to the Wallabies. They were mentally good that day in Johannesburg. What a classic test match. I know, to be on the losing side again is a bit tragic, but the Wallabies are back, and that's what makes me happy.
Well, look, that's a positive way of putting things, I suppose. But coming up on the show, we preview round 3 of the Rugby Championship, where New Zealand will take on South Africa in Eden Park, and Argentina travel to Australia and look to make it back-to-back wins in the Rugby Championship. All before we go through the Women's Rugby World Cup, which has seen a pulsating round 2 of action in the tournament, which is a lot of sides qualify for the quarterfinals. So we'll go through that as well. But we'll start with Eden Park. New Zealand versus South Africa, one of the biggest fixtures in the rugby calendar, or just in general in rugby. Look, as a Springboks fan, how are you feeling heading into this one?
I'm a bit nervous, mate. I really am. I think this is the biggest test since the World Cup final, no doubt. I think, and to say that in the Lions year is mental, but this is the world champions against currently ranked world number 1. You know, really, I think it's a coin toss between the two at the moment over who is actually world number 1. Um, the two biggest teams in rugby history, 7 World Cups. My camera just fell over. We will continue.
We'll continue.
Seven World Cups. That's 70% of all World Cups played. More, I don't know, more historic matches and the biggest rivalry in the sport, perhaps one of the biggest rivalry in all sports. If you think of the political meaning, the heritage it has to it, the stories that have come from it. And this is South Africa on a 4-game winning streak here. If they extend it to 5, even 6, it's the longest streak any team's had against the All Blacks. I think they could do it, but New Zealand are going to fight hard. I don't know if you watched the Argentina game, but I looked at it, and the huge errors that the All Blacks had is their aerial game, and I think that is going to decide it. The Springboks look a bit rough, but they look like they've got their basic ideas ready and will be a lot stronger going into the next test. I think for New Zealand.
It's interesting to sort of see the different tactical battles will be there in terms of the different personnel. Going into this game, New Zealand, you speak about the aerial battle, the kicking battle. Well, it's no secret that New Zealand have a lot of injury problems at 9. Cam Roygaard, Cortez Ratama, both out injured, and they've had to bring in a couple of sort of new scrum halves, Kyle Preston from Crusaders, Xavier Rowe from the Chiefs. We sort of expect Kyle Preston to start, I believe, is what I've been sort of hearing. And Finlay Christie or potentially come off the bench, but that could be either or. We obviously the teams have not come out based as we're recording this right now. But how do you think that 9 problem, so to speak, would impact New Zealand here?
I think with a team like New Zealand, the 10 is the workhorse. You know, Barrett, I think, will be starting 10, and that will ease New Zealand by having a less experienced 9 on the field. I think it gets quite tight because I really like Cam Roygaard. We've seen how excellent he has been in high pressure situations, which is a shame why he can't play. I really think he's the real deal, and you need a sort of 9 like that. But the thing is, New Zealand had Aaron Smith for nigh on a decade, who was probably one of the greatest 9s to ever grace the game. You know, he's up there with the likes of Farid Priya and Jos van der Westhuizen. He revolutionized how he attacked the sport. And I think New Zealand have to try and get a 9 at the moment who can kick well, but it's also that minor game management and getting in the dark arts. New Zealand need a player at 9 who sort of acts as a leader rather than just a tactical player.
How would you go at 9 though, when you compare those three scrum halves? I've seen sort of people saying online you maybe go for one of the more inexperienced nines from the start, and then maybe bring on a Finlay Christie to manage the game later on in the game. Or conversely, I suppose you could say Finlay Christie's got the experience, he's played the most for the All Blacks, he should start at 9 and then sort of bring someone else in for a bit of energy. What sort of way would you stand on that debate?
If I'm honest, it's a bit of a catch-22. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Especially against the
Personally,
Springboks.
I would start the inexperienced scrum half because scrum halves nowadays have the engine to go the full 80. If that scrum half has issues or just isn't coping with it on the day, you can drag on a scrum half who's been there, done that. I've always thought to start, if you've got an inexperienced player in a big test, you don't want them being at the tail end of the game, especially when the points matter most. Really, I think to drag on an inexperienced player who's not used to the occasion, this is the biggest game in world rugby. The pressure is insurmountable. Having a younger player not able to cope with that, but then could be taken off after 20, 30, 40 minutes, bringing on the likes of Finlay Christie to make an impact and get the All Blacks going again, is what they need. But also, that's not to say an inexperienced scrum half can't cope with it.
Saying what works really. I mean, Scott Robinson will know his scrum halves, he'll know their strengths, he'll know their sort of what mental
Mm.
state they are in heading into the game, so he'll have a better idea than us. He also spoke about the different styles of the two teams. How do you expect the Springboks to sort of counteract the New Zealand style, especially when you throw the sort of the new nines or the new makeup of the halfbacks into the mix?
Aggressive defense, and they've just got to mark the Barretts, especially the back Barretts, Geordie and Bowden, and get the laundry missile in. It's just, just tell Peter Steph to go kill him and get up in their face. I think with New Zealand, the way that they play an attacking game, you've got to have a fast defense, but manage your spacings. I think is Colby and Arendse are both out injured, or maybe it's just Arendse. So it's Arendse and Van der Merwe are out injured. So Colby will start, and either Moody, Hooker, or Mapimpi will start, which will be an interesting call from Russie. I'd like to see them get really up in the New Zealand faces. We saw Colby be very good in the second test, getting into Australia and making the meters, but also defensive work. It's just making tackles, making reads, putting in the big shots when need be, and also not being afraid to let New Zealand make 2 or 3 meters extra and then going for a steal there. It's finding a hole to then exploit in the defensive system. So yes, New Zealand might march you back 5 meters, but suddenly you're better set to push them back at 10.
As a sort of someone standing on the Springbok side and, a fan yourself, would you identify anything in the Argentina games that the New Zealand plays that Springboks could go after this week?
Aerial game. Colby, I think, is one of the best players under the high ball at the moment. Van der Merwe and Arendse are the same, and they're all tiny. But New Zealand's high ball game was awful. They were disastrous.
Well, I think they managed it quite well in the first test, or maybe it was
Second,
maybe a lack of accuracy,
that
maybe from
I think
Argentina. But I think, yeah,
no,
you're right. In the second game, it was a
in the first
clear.
test, the kicks were a bit too long or a bit too short, which meant that New Zealand were a bit safer. But when Argentina were putting the ball perfectly weighted, high up in the right positioning, got under New Zealand's skin, and New Zealand couldn't deal with that. And that is where you make meters. New Zealand might take the ball, receive it, but then they get marched back in a tackle, or the pressure comes onto them, and then it's just an insurmountable again and again and again and again until a turnover or a penalty comes. So that's just, I'd say South Africa, that's why they brought Buff in, kicking. South Africa need a great kicking game to pressure them. And I think Grant Williams and Kobus Reinach are perfect for it.
Yeah, and on the other side, when you're looking at New Zealand and how they could get out the Springboks, Australia sort of showed the deficiencies, I suppose, in the Springboks. Like they really picked off the Springboks in Brokenfield. Is that sort of an area where you would see New Zealand having a bit of success, especially with the way they sort of play, which is a very fluid game of rugby, running rugby a lot.
Chipping over the back, putting pressure on the fullback, finding space behind the defensive line, then assaulting it with fast runners. That's where they need to be because that's where they'll have the biggest impact. And I think that's something that we haven't really talked about. And South Africa might have been doing we know what Russie's like. He does one defensive system for one test match and then all of a sudden plays a completely different one in the World Cup final. So that might just be a bit of a bait and switch. But this, I think, will say a lot. And New Zealand are going to definitely target Fussy or Willemse. We've also got to talk about Willemse later, but I think New Zealand have to really force South Africans to turn their backs and run because it's just you get an extra 0.1 seconds to go after that ball and make meters there. It's just getting that extra. So it's not the long kicking game, it's short stuff, it's tactical, it's breaking through the lines, going up the field through the middle, and adding pressure that way to score.
So you see on both sides really that the back threes are a bit of a weakness for both sides, really,
I'd say
in terms of like defending the aerial kicking
I
game.
think so. It's not. It's for South Africa. It's more structural. It's where they're being positioned. For New Zealand, it's the players. I think I just for some reason aren't as competent under the high ball. So I think South Africa's got an easier fix than New Zealand do.
Yeah,
But
you think
this
it's
is
just a change of system, a change of positioning, learning from their mistakes against Australia, and sort of
yeah,
rather than the players not being able to cope with it.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that about New Zealand's back three, and deficiencies under the high ball against Argentina, because Lester Fainga'anuku, hope I'm saying that right, has come back in as cover in the All Black squad. Could you see him featuring at all?
I'm not sure. The thing is, New Zealand back three. I'd probably have at fullback. I'd probably want Will Jordan on one wing. Caleb Clark is out of the squad, isn't he?
He is out. He's out injured. Yeah.
Yeah, so I could see him playing Leicester Fainga'anuku playing somewhere, but I don't know if he's got. I don't. I just think if he's opposite Colby, especially, he'll be run rings around. He's a great player, but I don't think he matches the intensity.
Well, Xavier Reese has had a couple of really good games against Argentina. Like I say, he's probably been a bit of a live wire in those two games. There's sort of been Rico Ioane. There's been sort of criticisms over him. Is that sort of someone you would see maybe coming out if you're pointing to that as a potential weakness?
I think the problem with Sevu Reece is he gives away penalties, and New Zealand's discipline this year has been abysmal. Just straight up. I don't even know how many. It was 3 yellow cards against Argentina in the second test. Um,
Yeah, there
all of
was.
them
Yeah, there are at least two. Yeah.
all of them deserved. And I think this is something that South Africa are going to pick on with the back three, especially. Severis is an amazing rugby player, wonderful to watch, but he can get hot-headed. So I would still play him. I think you need a big bruiser, and that's sort of in the winger role against South Africa because of the physicality edge. Um, but it just means New Zealand have to be on top of their discipline because if they make mistakes or if they give away penalties, it's not like playing England. I don't want to sound derogatory, but it's not like when you play England or even England or France or Ireland or Australia or Argentina, where okay, you give it away a penalty, it's maybe a 60% chance they take 3 points, and then of that maybe a 60% chance of them converting those 3 points. We saw Australia miss, I think, 11 points off the tee last weekend, or was it 9 points? However, with South Africa, if Andre Pollard's on the pitch and you're in range, it's a guaranteed 3 points. And that is just what will kill New Zealand. It's that slow suffocation. And I think it's something that South Africa has over all other teams in the world, is the best goal kicker who can consistently put 3 points on anywhere in the field.
Well, I think for everyone except probably well, France, I would say, have a very Tomo Ramos doesn't really miss too much.
He doesn't miss too much unless Colby's
Ben
charging
Smith's
him
not a
down.
bad goal kicker either. But I see
Yeah,
what you
they're
mean
not
there.
they're not bad, but Neve they don't have 100% records at World Cups.
Yeah.
You know, it's a
Well, it's the
sort of
pressure kicking, isn't it? And do you think that's why Andre Pollard may be picked over a Manny Leboeck on Saturday?
Manu Leboc's not playing. He's disastrous playing the first test. I think it's ruled him out. I think now is the time to bring in Hendrickser into the squad to replace Leboc. Pollard isn't the thing is Pollard's like an extra center in almost. He kicks like the best 10. He kicks like Carter, but he runs like Diolende. He is up for the contact. And I think that's something that South Africa needs. They need 10s who are physical, who hard tackle. And that's where I think Leboc doesn't fit in the squad because Leboc's more of a Elton Yankees sort of fast passing, fast kicking, out the back of the hand tricks, but not as consistent off the tee and not as good at tackling, which is when Ngomazulu needs to stand up and really make big hits, go for turnovers, get his hands dirty.
So if you're going for Andre Pollard at 10 there, does that mean we sort of seen two styles really against Australia, in both like in the two games really. We saw the new sort of style of the Springboks picking and going at every single opportunity, trying to get the ball wide, expansive gameplay, to a more sort of pragmatic game again in the second test. What sort of mix are we going to see from the Springboks this week? Do you think?
I think it would be a bit
Style.
like the test against England last year. Moments of heavy forward play, kicking, a lot of pressure build up, similar to how South Africa beat New Zealand last year, actually. Lots of kicking, but in moments of magic will just happen. You know, I think Grant Williams will be the starting nine, Kobus Reinach will be on the bench. Two fantastic scrum halves. Pollard will play the full 80. They might move him to 12 and bring him Gomazulu in at 10 to add more dynamic play, or we'll see how that happens, or even have Gomazulu at fullback. It could be a sort of a different style there. You know, he played very well against Ireland at the fullback position. So I think South Africa will look to play a very aggressive game plan up front, but there will be moments of running, of just getting it to the wings and letting them have a go. It reminds
Yes,
me
what I'm
much.
trying to say is, look, is it going to be more like game plan in test one against Australia or game plan in test two against Australia?
It's going to be probably about 60% game plan two, but I think I would call it game plan three because I don't actually think it'll resemble it completely. I think actually there'll be whole new elements that the Springboks have got waiting to test against these teams.
Do you believe they've been holding some things back for this test in particular?
We've been watching Rossi since 2018. He's always holding something back. This is the biggest game he has to have.
Yeah. So do you think this is also, I'd asked this question to Dom last week, and as we finish up on this chat and we go towards our predictions, I asked Dom last week, heading 2 years out, or just over 2 years out from a World Cup, heading to Eden Park, probably the biggest test since, as you say, since that Rugby World Cup final. How big a sort of measuring point is this for the Springboks in their progress since that last Rugby World Cup?
This is mega. It's also for New Zealand. I think Springboks' new coaching team, New Zealand new head coach, this says everything about where the teams are, how they want to play, and also what the team culture is on the field. You know, this game shows how much of a contender both sides are 2 years out. Now, you know, 2 years is a long time. Games and styles can be completely different by the time they head to Australia, which you know does do it down a little bit. You know, if this was a year out from the World Cup, it would be this is how we're going to see who wins. But I think because we're 2 years out, this is going to sort of say we've got an idea now. We know how they play in the biggest pressure game. Let's see how teams catch up to them.
And if you say that, and you're saying this is sort of, I guess, going to be this will be a barometer of where those sort of two top teams are going to, potentially build on towards that World Cup. that would suggest that I reckon a lot of eyes are going to be on this game around World Rugby. I'm sure Andy Farrell, Fabien Galtier, Steve Borthwick, they'll all have keen eyes on this game. But moving towards a prediction, how do you see this game panning out? Obviously, we've got the jeopardy of this game, of it being potentially, if one team wins it, goes on and wins the Rugby Championship, probably favourites, given the strength of the two squads. But we've also got a bit of history on the line here, where the Springboks could potentially be the first side since France in 1994 to beat the All Blacks at Eden Park. So that
Yeah,
is
I
what's
think
on the line here. So look, I guess the question is, can the Springboks do it? And how do you reckon the game's going to go?
we haven't won there since 1937. I don't think we've played there since 2017 on Alistair Coetzee. You know, we haven't played them in the Rossi era here, or at Eden Park. How do I think it's going to go? That's a tough question. I've been wearing that on my mind. I think we will do it by five, five max. I think it's that sort of 3 to 5 point radius of it's a kick, but also I can see New Zealand winning by 2 or 3 or 5. So the diplomat in me wants to say it's either team by 5, but I'll go. My heart says the Springboks by 5.
Where is it won?
It's that aerial battle. It's getting pressure, getting turnovers, getting penalties, and I think there's going to be some. I've just got this feeling in me. Rossi's going to pull something out the bag that we've never seen before, and they'll score a try off it or make some points off it. I wouldn't be surprised if they pull the move from the 2019 World Cup final this weekend, which is where
Which
they
move? Just
short
for
line short line out to the 12, who was cleared by a wing and the 10, which allowed all the forwards to set up into a maul formation immediately in the middle of the field. Nine goes to the eighth man. Eighth man sets them all into the tacklers. England collapsed it deliberately. I mean, it was 7 points if they didn't, which meant only 3 points were lost. But that's the sort of thing South Africa could pull out. That sort of mental and also very physical approach will get under New Zealand's skin.
Mm, okay, yeah. So I will go for. I also fancy you guys in this. I think, particularly with their problems at 9, I'm not really sure how they're going to manage that. Eden Park obviously is a fortress, but I think
We
you will have them by 3 points, I believe.
we broke their
I think
Dunedin
you're right.
record.
Andre Pollard at 10. I think just applying the pressure on the 9, whether that's Finlay Christie or Kyle Preston or Xavier Rowe, whoever it is. I think they'll apply that pressure. You'll apply that, I guess, that lack of continuity that we're seeing in the New Zealand halfbacks at the minute, and I think you'll win the game by 3 points. But we look forward to that one. That is, of course, on Saturday at 5 past 8 a.m. Luke will be up and roaring for then. He'll probably not get much sleep the night before. And yeah, 5 past 7 p.m. in local time there. So we look forward to that. And we move on to our second game, just the small matter of Australia versus Argentina, which will be played in the Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville, so different location for the Wallabies on this occasion. That will be 5:30 in the morning, or 5:30 in British summer time, and 2:30, 14:30 local time there. So we look forward to seeing that. And what do you think? How do you reckon this one's going to go between these two sides who have had a bit of momentum, had a bit of confidence after their wins against these top two sides in the world?
I don't actually know. My head instantly says Argentina by 5. But I'm a bit unsure. I mean, this is a tough fixture for Argentina and Australia, actually. This has always sort of been the dog fixture of the Rugby Championship, but now with both teams really coming into their strides, I think it allows a lot of pressure to be added. But Argentina have no longer got that hoodoo of we're traveling, we're going to lose. Something that was, a lot of teams have that thing of they play worse when they're away, but for some reason Argentina don't have that. And I think there will be an element of we can really pressure them here. So
And that pressure
I
will
see
come
Argentina.
on. That pressure will come on with the amount of injuries, which will be a key that Australia have. With as we've seen in the past couple of weeks, Skelton has been not injured, obviously, but has been sent back to La Rochelle. Tom Wright ACL injury, who's been out for a long time. Dylan Peach and Langy Gleeson are also out. So it's a lot of
Um,
injuries there for the Wallabies. With they do have Harry Wilson and Harry Potter coming back in for them. But how do you reckon that'll impact sort of Joe Schmidt and how he wants to play this game?
I mean, can we just talk about the stupidity of Will Skelton having to go back to La Rochelle? I think personally World Rugby should intervene here because this is international rugby. It's the peak of the game. It's not like football where, the club game matters more. This is Australia's biggest chance in the last 10, 15 years to win the Rugby Championship. Why do they have to lose their best player because the French clubs want him back for their season? They should allow the players to continue in the international game first. And I'm sorry I've drafted away, but this is really, really irritating me. I want to see all the best players on the field. I don't want to see teams hampered because some French coach, or well, the French board of directors who are already incredibly corrupt, decide to have the sport done in their own way. They are corrupt. They bought the rights to the World Cup. It's already been proven. Bernard Laporte um, even had a 2 year suspended sentence for corruption within the 2024 Olympic Games. So the French rugby doing this as a body is disgusting to the sport, actually. And I'm really, really ashamed by it. And I think it has hurt the Wallabies in such a way because the Wallabies need the likes of Skelton, who's physical, he's up front, he's massive, he puts in big tackles, he's a bit of a house, he gets everywhere and he gets stuck in and he makes an impact. So losing that now, Harry Wilson's excellent, but he's just not the same. This is going to be, I think this is going to be Argentina's game because Australia are just so hampered.
Well, it's an interesting one because the ghetto rule has been sort of abolished, where Australia can pick French players who play in France for the
Finally,
Rugby Championship. That's finally been, and it seemed like a step forward then. But now we've had this, or La Rochelle being able to call back Will Skelton, he sort of had to go back there. So it's a bit of a kick in the teeth for Australia there after the change to that rule, and is what we've seen sort of, right, well, now we can have all of our best players playing at the Rugby Championship, but now it sort of seems, well, no, we can't, because the French clubs will have the power over the players to, you know, bring them back. So it is a frustrating one for Australia for sure. Tom Hooper, I believe, is expected to fill in. It's moved from back row into the second row for them, and then Harry Wilson obviously go into the back row as well. But yeah, do you think there's like in terms of positives for this game for the Wallabies, coming off the back of two really, really good tests against the Springboks? Where do you think they can get at Argentina, where New Zealand perhaps found some success against them?
fast play. It's just playing fast. It's making pressure. It's running hard. It's actually that quick ball that Australia have been very good at recently. That getting the likes of Corey Toole involved, put some pressure on. Clever kicking by Nick White, especially. We saw that in the second test. It's just really speed of ball and aggressive style of rugby. And I think if is that sort of what Australia's DNA is in rugby anyway. I think if they continue doing that, they'll add enough pressure onto Argentina for this game to be close. But I'm still saying Argentina by 6 or 7. I just think they're on too much of a momentum roll.
Do you think they can maybe get at the fly half position potentially? Or well, obviously Thomas Albanos had a hand injury. He's not travelled with the squad. The new fly half, Nicholas Roger, sort of a rookie fly half who made his debut in July there. Do you think they can they can get at. Well, it'll probably be Carrera starting and Roger probably off the bench, I would imagine. But do you think they can get at the Argentina?
So, Santi Carreras is one of he was in my World 15. Um, I actually think he is going to be fine. He'll do well in that jersey. I think Australia will look to target him and try and catch him off guard, but he'll just shrug it off and put pressure back on them. He's one of those really dynamic players that just flips it over. He sort of reminds me of um, not Dan Carter, but early Bowden Barrett. Sort of things were getting thrown onto him, and he can just flip it back and really, really add a bit of pressure onto the opposition and gain some momentum for his team. And his kicking is excellent.
He was superb as soon as it was sort of a seamless transition between Albornoz and Carreras in that game. But moving on to prediction for this game, I think you're quite set on Argentina for this one. What's the prediction for it?
By 6 or 7. I just think Argentina
What's going
look
to be
too
the
good.
key? What's going to be the key for them winning that game by 6 or 7 points?
Argentina are actually a physical team when you start watching them in their scrum and in their rucks. And I think it's just that brawling behavior. Get
Paulo
in.
Matera, do you think? Paulo Matera
Yeah, it's
and Martin
just
Gonzalez?
Montoya getting
Montero.
into him, really, really hitting hard, getting in their face, like murdering them, like proper physical fighting. Get under them, go through the middle. Because Argentina has excellent wings who can score fantastic tries, but they can also maul the Australians backwards and backwards and backwards and out scrum them. South Africa were out scrumming Australia the entire time in the second test. And they can do that again. If Argentina can do that, they'll win by at least 7.
Hmm. Yeah, and do you not think but just to pose a couple of counterpoints to what you're saying there, in terms of the physicality, do you not think with the Wallabies rather posing the physicality they pose against the Springboks, do you not think they can replicate that against Argentina?
I think it's a different type of test. South Africa had a very rotated squad, especially in the first test. Second test, South Africa was still missing some of their key physical players. So there is an element of actually Argentina coming in this with their best. This is going to be more brutal in that aspect. Now that South Africa have got Khaleesi and them back, I think it'll be completely different to what we saw, which is why Australia were able to play a bit more of a physical game.
What about Australia's aerial prowess? How do you think that's going to go against the back three of that was so good against New Zealand for Argentina?
This is just, I think it's a fair fight, and I think that the aerial game will almost be it will become less important because if both teams are just winning their own kicks or if they're both putting on pressure, it's amazing because even though it becomes negligible, it's still meters made, it adds more territory. It makes the kicking game a bit more interesting, makes it far more competitive, but it means both teams are going to have to adapt around it. I do think, though, that is a platform where Australia go on to maybe even beat New Zealand this year. So we shall see.
But they're not beating them this week, according to Luke. They win by 7 points. To be honest, and you can maybe tell by my questioning there. I fancy Australia again for this one. I think particularly on home turf, and coming off the back of the two performances against the Springboks, I think they've just got real good momentum, real good like continuity, and sort of it seems they've had injuries throughout the 3 Lions tests and the 2 Springboks tests, but in the last 2 Lions tests and the last 2 Springboks tests, obviously that first test against the Lions wasn't very good, but ever since then, no matter who they've brought into that team, it seems like the level of performance has sort of remained even in that test 2 weeks ago where they lost. And I reckon with the even though they'll be missing Gleeson, they'll be missing Skelton, you've still got huge players like that back row, with McWright, Hooper, who may go into the second row, Wilson. I think they'll bring huge physicality there. I think someone like Nick White at 10, going up against slightly inexperienced Garcia, I think he could manage the game really well. And I think, yeah, just that back line. I think Harry Potter coming back in is huge. It's a bit of a miss with Dylan Peach, but Harry Potter's a very good player, as we've seen time and time again. I think Andrew Kellaway came in very well for Tom Wright as well in the last Springboks test. So I fancy the Wallabies in this one. I think it will be tight. I will go for the Wallabies by 4, and I think that aerial game, as has been the case for a lot of the Wallaby success, will be a key in this game. I believe they'll win by 4 points. But that is our Rugby Championship Round 3 preview, which moves us on to the Women's Rugby World Cup, which has seen a wonderful second round of action. I mean, unbelievable. The tries that have been scored in this, the records that have been broken in this round. Jess Breach had scored 52 tries up for England after a hat trick against Samoa, where they absolutely just took them to the cleaners there and just carried on their momentum. What have you made about the most recent round of the Rugby World Cup in England?
Well, Portia Woodman became the first New Zealander to ever, I think it's reached 50 tries in international rugby, and both men or women.
First for both men and women, yes,
in New
that's right.
Zealand. So that's incredible. I think actually, I mean, we sort of know who the two dominant teams are. It's England and New Zealand are the best teams in the competition. But we're seeing Ireland, Spain have put up a good fight this year. Brazil,
they're looking very good as well.
Canada are incredible.
They're a very good team.
It's because they haven't been hindered by poor coaching like Kingsley Jones, unlike the men's side. They are really, really strong, and Canada has amazing rugby heritage, and I'm so glad it's coming back. I'd like to talk a bit about Brazil and just say they're getting pumped, but they look like they're having fun this World Cup. And as a country, for a country that hasn't made a men's World Cup, this is just wonderful. And I think Samoa,
they've not been nilled by either
no,
Springboks or France. So
they've put up a fight, and I thought Samoa, it's a shame the score, but semi-pro
team.
The
celebrations I thought were fantastic after they scored those 3 points there. I think that was great. I think that was the first 3 points of the World Cup as well, which is huge for them.
I'm so happy that they got to celebrate and also just to experience rugby like this, against one of the best teams around. And it's just quite nice. And it's a shame that they have to be semi-pro. They should have a pro women's team, but hopefully World Rugby's money can go somewhere. The game I think we do need to talk about, though, and maybe a bit from a selfish perspective, is South Africa have finally made the women's knockouts for the first time ever after beating Italy and going into the women's top 10 for the first time.
That was an unbelievable game. I mean, it's just back and forth, wasn't it?
But it was the Italian, very fast running game, very, almost graceful to watch. And then it was, and then the South African women's team. The South African women's team is very much like the men's, isn't it?
Well, dominant scrum,
just wanting scrums, power, physical, brutal. And what's amazing is seeing the transformation in the squad, something that a lot of people, South Africa is a very diverse country, just naturally how it is. And to see that sort of reflected in the squad, it's wonderful. We're seeing so much positivity from the women's game and also in social media, people supporting the women's rugby. Rossi was even up at 3 a.m. to watch the women's game and to tweet about it.
I did see that.
It is so good to see, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the women box against either New Zealand or Ireland in a quarterfinal. I think it is absolutely amazing because I really, really enjoy watching them. I think this is a team who reflect a lot of struggle and are just showing what they've got. And I do think I'm so glad they're physical. I'm so glad they're up and hard. And Suisse de Bruyne, as the head coach, has really, really put some effort in and made these women fantastic players.
Well, you go through that result. That was probably the tightest game of round 2. But we'll go through all the other results here. So Canada won 42-0 against Wales to put Wales out of the Women's Rugby World Cup.
It was not the tightest game.
That wasn't. No. I'm not saying. I was saying.
No, and then the South Africa game wasn't the tightest game either.
No, that's exactly what I was saying. Scotland winning 29-15 against
Oh,
Fiji
yeah.
to secure their qualification. England, of course, as we mentioned at the start, with Jess Breach scoring a hat-trick. Meg Jones absolutely imperious in that game, winning 92-3 at Franklin's Gardens. I believe Dom was in attendance for that one, or co-host.
Mate of mine was actually in attendance there as well.
Oh, very good. Yeah, no, fantastic atmosphere there. And I think that's England's biggest ever Rugby World Cup win as well, which is huge. A massive. Well, this was quite literally the tightest game. USA, Australia, 31 each. Huge game that was. Great watch. And Ireland beating Spain 43-27, 12 tries in that game. New Zealand, as we had said, with Portia Woodman winning 62-19. Japan putting up a spirited fight. They actually scored first in that game, which is huge for them, and they put up a real even against Ireland, they were really causing Ireland a lot of problems as well. South Africa, as we mentioned, winning 29-24 against Italy. France beating Brazil 84-5. They're looking very good. Probably one of the favourites as well for this tournament. But you sort of look through that there, and I think a lot of our quarterfinals have been, well, the order of them haven't been decided, but I think who is in the quarterfinals has been decided. So England, Australia are basically, the Wallaroos are basically through. They're on 8 points, 5 ahead of USA, who they drew with, but they've got a much better points difference, so it would sort of take quite a big margin of defeat to the Red Roses and the USA to really hammer Samoa for any turnaround in that pool. Canada and Scotland, as we say, are through the quarters. New Zealand and Ireland are through as well. And South Africa and France are also through to the quarterfinals. So that's all that there. Is there any matchups in the quarterfinals which you'd be particularly looking forward to and you particularly like to see as we enter round 3?
I mean, out of pure intrigue, I want to see the South Africans play New Zealand, but I'd actually like to see us play Ireland. So
Oh,
we could
really?
have this great debate and
Okay.
talk about Ireland's record in what quarterfinals. I'd get a full list out for you, um, explaining everything. Just to remind you. No, I think actually,
It
no,
doesn't.
I
It
think
just doesn't stop, does it?
no.
Not till yeah.
Actually, your women's team have won
What
the World Cup
happens
game
then if
before.
Ireland beat the Springboks and head to a semi-final? That's a double whammy for you. The Springboks are out and Ireland make a semi-final of a
Well, they've
Rugby
done it
World
before.
Cup.
Well, the Ireland women's have done it before. So maybe they should send the women's team to the men's World Cup because they might do better. But
Lisa,
no,
I just think that'd
I
be
think it'd be an
quite
interesting
interesting
matchup
to
because
see.
Ireland have come a lot over the past year or two, and they've been incredible to watch as well. So I think that would be an interesting mix of styles coming to play. Ireland playing more fast but also physical game against one of the physical teams coming through. I think France New Zealand would be a great game, but also I'd like to see England versus Canada. I really like, Sophie de Goody. I think, you know, possibly one of the best women's players in the world at the moment. Leading Canada, her spirit's incredible. I think if she can really pressure England, it could be tight. But that's also where they qualify in points, so that might be a semi-final. Um, Australia. I think we can pretty much suggest that they're going to go through. Now, will the Wallaroos beat either Canada or Scotland? I think that'll be tight. I quite like the shape of the Wallaroos at the moment. It could be a bit tighter. I do think Fiji, sorry, not Fiji. I think Scotland. I don't know with Scotland. I think they play a bit like the men's team. They're a little bit unpredictable. They're a great team on the day, but there might be
They're
cracks under
most
pressure.
likely, you would say, out of that group, given the results that we've had, they're most likely to play the Red Roses
Mm.
in the quarterfinals, which would be obviously a big rivalry, England Scotland in a quarterfinal. That would be great to see. So that's probably more likely what you're going to see in that group,
Mm.
unless something happens to England and Australia where the Wallaroos can manage to beat the Red Roses, which I don't think many people would expect. Um, but yeah, is there any other teams you've got your eye on there potentially going far?
Well, we know New Zealand are going to go far. I think, you know, New Zealand are a fantastic side, and I think South Africa, it would always be a shame for South Africa to play them in a quarter. I'd love to play them in a semi or final, but again, you've got to then beat Ireland. I think France, New Zealand would be an amazing matchup. The occasion, the sort of, I don't know, there'd just be something to it, which I would really, really like to see. I think this World Cup is possibly the most open it's been in the past few years.
Well, I think
Last year
you've got a clear sort of an outstanding dominant force in England. You've
and New
got
Zealand.
well, just with the form guide, I think England have been the clear dominant, in my opinion.
No, but
But
the thing is that England were dominant for 32 matches until the 2021 Women's World Cup final.
yeah, well, that's the thing. The Black Ferns are always going to be a big contender, having won the 2021 tournament. But I think
They've got
England just
7 titles.
yeah
7 titles. I think
7.
Canada have a good
But
shout.
it's 6. I think 6.
Oh, six, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was 7. Anyway, but
Well, England are
anyway,
looking to add a third in this tournament, in their home tournament after 1994 and 2014. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there is, as you say, the Black Ferns will be, they'll be wanting to make that final and really go up. I think it's set out that way, isn't it? Where it would be one of, it could potentially be an England New Zealand final. I think. Am I? Believe I'm correct there. So it would be it's interesting to see which way it'll go with teams like Canada as well in the mix.
but I also think they could be an upset. You know, I think it's getting closer and closer, much like the men's game, and actually there could be a good upset on the cards here. And and honestly, I'd love there to be one. I'd love there to just be a something happens, something magical goes on, and we end up seeing a team like South Africa or Ireland in the final. Like a Canada Ireland final would make my day.
Be that would be a steep one. But you never know what can happen in the Women's Rugby World Cup. But we'll see how round 3 goes. Coming up this weekend and moving towards the quarterfinals, it is just hotting up. Great atmosphere around the place as well, around the Rugby World Cup. Celebration of women's rugby and just how far it is coming, and it's just been absolutely fantastic just to see all the scenes in England. But that wraps us up for episode 9 of the Ruck and Roll Show. Look forward to a big weekend of rugby action in the Rugby Championship and the Women's Rugby World Cup, and we'll be back next week where we digest potentially a Springboks Eden Park streak breaking victory, and we'll see the lineups of the Women's Rugby World Cup quarterfinals and who's going to be playing there. So we look forward to it this weekend. Make sure to tune in to all those games and tune in next week where we will go through all that again. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much, Luke, for turning out. It was brave of you. 2 weeks.
Oh,
Well, 3 weeks, I suppose, after that's Springboks loss, but respect
if we
coming
lose
on
again,
and
you're not seeing me
finally
for a
facing
month.
the music. What's that?
If we lose again, you're not seeing me for a month. Don't worry.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I have to weigh up. I have to weigh up whether I want the Springboks to win and you being on the show, or I want the Springboks to lose. Which, it's sort of a hard one. As an Ireland fan who's back from you for a couple of years now, I have to weigh that up, I suppose.
If we win this, I'm running around Cathays just fully like screwing my head off. This is the biggest game, so I can't wait for it. Hey mate, cheers for having me on again. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Well, we'll be back next week, and I will see you then. All the best. Bye bye.